not the case. The surgery was going to be nearly identical to the first one that I had. The fusion itself is already complete. The spinal fusion itself involves fusing the vertebrae together. So at this point, the surgery was considered a hardware revision because once the vertebrae they're fused. You can't unless the fusion itself fails. But my fusion was not failing. My vertebrae was completely fused and healing well, and they could tell by all these scans. So they actually take out all of the hardware because of the specific screw that was loose. She couldn't safely take out just that screw. She would have to remove all the hardware essentially and put it all back. I had this moment of disbelief and denial. One of my biggest fears of making this decision to go through with such a life-threatening surgery was that the hardware wouldn't hold. I'm only 2 weeks post-op, and I'm already facing one of my biggest fears and complications. And so now it was officially January 11th, 2021. I had been in the hospital for over 2 weeks now, and on January 11th, 2021, I was sent down to the operating room for a spinal fusion revision surgery. The night before was just like the original night before my original spinal fusion surgery. I barely got any sleep. I remember just being wide awake at 6 a.m. I was woken up at 4 a.m. to take some last minute medications before my surgery and some sips of water, and I think I was up ever since. My original spinal fusion surgery, I got 20 minutes of sleep, which is more than I got the second round. I was almost just as nervous for the second one as I was for the first. You guys know what my surgeons had done the first time was already deemed impossible by so many other surgeons, and I was so relieved to wake up, realize that I had the best outcome possible. No tracheostomy, was not paralyzed. I could not have come out of this surgery better. I did not even need any blood product, and just all of these things that we were anticipating the possibility didn't happen. It was just a sigh of relief, and I mean the burden and the weight that was lifted, and it's indescribable. It is truly the biggest burden that has ever been lifted from my shoulders, and having that burden put back on me, realizing that I had to do this again, even up until like the morning of, just didn't even seem having to do the impossible again. As I mentioned, my surgeon obviously was able to correct my scoliosis somewhat, but it is not perfect. It is not even close to perfect, and that's because of the extent of scoliosis that had already taken place by the time I did the surgery. Just because my curve is slightly improved, it did not improve my respiratory conditions greatly. My respiratory conditions have improved somewhat and more than I expected, but I still have restrictive lung disease. My conditions are perfect. Like, I still have osteogenesis imperfecta, and my lungs are still greatly impacted by that. And so I think when I went into this the second time, a lot of people probably thought that my risks were much less because things had somewhat improved, and while the improvement is true, it was not enough to greatly decrease my of undergoing something like this. So my risk of needing tracheostomy by going through this again was not decreased. Revision surgery was going to be almost as long as the original spinal fusion surgery, just because of what is needed to be done and having to take all the hardware out and putting it back in, and the length of time that I would need to be under anesthesia. Anytime you're dealing with the spinal cord, whether you have osteogenesis imperfecta or not, the risk of becoming paralyzed, and so my risk did not decrease there either. I guess what I'm trying to say is I want you to understand that me going into this the second time, my risks were not decreased. I was essentially facing all the same risks as I was the first time. The stakes did not change, and so that was part of the processing for me of having to go through this again. I know that God finishes what he starts, and I knew that they're going to bring me through these several months of attraction and give me this miraculous outcome of my spinal fusion, only for it to fail now. It's good, and he finishes what he starts, and I knew that he was going to do the same this time, and this was just another part of the journey that he had for me. I don't know why, but it is what it is, and it was meant to happen. And so it's January 11th, 2021. Like I said, night before, I didn't sleep. So basically I'd been up all night. I was ready to go. I was hopeful that after this surgery that I would finally be closer than ever to going home. I had not seen my family at all during this time, except for FaceTime. I was not allowed to have any visitors, and my family lived many hours away, and so I saw no one pretty much, except for the exception that I was able to make. I don't think I ever did talk about it. I said I was going to talk about it, but for some reason I didn't. But there's a couple more videos that I have in my spinal fusion series, so I'll get into that. But the exception that I was able to make for my friend Brenda to come visit me, be on my list of visitors, only visitors. And so that morning she had to work, but she came long enough to come into my room and the nurses took me, but be with me while they took me down to pre-op for my surgery, my revision surgery. And again, if you missed the previous video, this surgery, my spine was already fused. You can't, unless the fusion itself fails, you can't have a second spinal fusion. Once the vertebrae is fused, it's fused, unless the fusion itself fails, but the fusion did not fail for me. My vertebrae is holding well, and the fusion is fine. This was just a revision of the hardware, so a piece of the hardware had come loose, and this was going to involve my surgeon needing to take all the hardware out, realigning it basically and putting it back in, completely removing the piece that was loose and not putting that one back in. She ended up doing something different, which I'll explain. And so Brenda came bright and early that morning and whisked me away to pre-op, hung out with me down there until they took me back. And then my friend Kelly came back. Again, she was there with me on my original spinal fusion day as well. She was working that morning too, so I got her for a brief second, and I actually pretty much got to skip the entire pre-op process this time around because I was inpatient for already 2.5 weeks, and so there was nothing new really to need to be discussed. I hadn't left yet or went home. So that was the first surgery I ever got to skip the pre-op. They had me in the pre-op holding area, but they didn't do any of the pre-op tests except for the day before, they did the blood work and stuff, but nothing in the pre-op station, I guess. And so that was really weird. I was in pre-op for maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then my surgeon came out, or we go in, and we just are you ready to do this again? It was just pretty surreal, and we were ready, she was ready. She had another amazing team with her, again making sure she had some of the best people. They were not all the same people that I had the original time, because like I said, this was so urgent and not planned, obviously. She had to get who she could get, but she still tried to get some of the very best that they had, because again, mind you, my risk was not any lower of things. I go in the OR, again, skipping the whole pre-op process was really weird, but also really nice. My surgery wasn't supposed to start until, I wasn't even supposed to go down until I think 8 or 8:30, because there was a girl in front of me that was supposed to go, it was a 20 or 30 minute surgery. I think it was probably a halo placement if I had to guess. I don't know of any other orthopedic surgery that only takes 30 minutes, and so I think it was probably a halo placement. But anyways, so she actually failed her pre-COVID test. She tested positive for COVID, so her surgery got canceled. I got to go ahead of her, obviously, so I was my surgeon's only patient that day. So I got to go in early, which was nice, because obviously I'm in NPO, and so it was nice to be able to go first and saw my friends and into the OR, and it was, again, just surreal to be doing this again, and had a really great team that's really aware of the plan and just confident in their ability. Of course, they are the absolute best, and I'm just so grateful for their will to never give up on me, and because I know I'm a really complicated patient, Even though I've been through this now 27 times, I don't know, there's just something about like going in that OR room, I don't know, like it's just, I get like emotional or something, I don't know. But I was getting ready to face the impossible. When I woke up at a much decent hour this time. I, again, didn't have anyone there with me, but they allowed my friend Brenda this time to come into my ICU room. I was, again, sent up to the ICU room after a week. I was finally out of the ICU room, and then a week in the stable floor, on the stable floor, and then a week later back in ICU for my second surgery again because I was so high risk. Revision surgery took about 7.5 hours. My spinal fusion was 9.5 hours. So almost just as long, but not quite. But given the extensive work that had to be done and the potential effect this could have on my lungs, the plan was for me to stay intubated 24 hours again after my spinal fusion. And so, well, 12 hours, I guess. Well, I don't know. Anyways, the next day, while I was still intubated, I woke up in ICU. I actually woke up in the OR this time. This time they woke me up in the OR. Actually, the second time I'd woken up in the OR. Not during the surgery. The surgery was over with. But when they wake you up in the OR, the first thing they say is there's a bunch of people saying the surgery is over, because they don't want the patient to go to panic mode thinking that they woke up during the surgery. And so they woke me up, I was still in the operating room, and I remember them asking me, like, how's your breathing? Like, I want to stay intubated. Because last time, as you guys know, I did so well. They were able to turn my vent settings, like, way down, and I was able to be extubated earlier than they expected. Still, the next day I was extubated, but they expected me to need to be intubated potentially 2 days, and I had exceeded those expectations. You can watch that video if you want to learn more. Being that I did so well, they had asked me this time, like, how my breathing felt this time, because afterwards, like, I felt pretty good. So they asked me this time, considering I did so well, like, does she need to stay intubated, right? Time around. But again, the extent of work that was done and what I had just went through was equivalent to what I just had done. And I woke up and I just remember my breathing feeling really weird, and I felt like I was struggling even though I wasn't, even while I was intubated. And I remember that the first time I woke up intubated, I didn't feel this way, and so I nodded my head like, yes, like, keep the vent in, and I wrote on my whiteboard, like, not breathing good, or something like that, or like struggling or something, like, yes, like, how does your breathing feel? And so anyways, bottom line is they decided to keep the ventilator in. I was just, like, way out of it. It was really weird waking up in the OR. They gave me more sedative after they woke me long enough to see how I was doing with the vent and to see if they should leave it in or pull it, and they decided to leave it in. So they gave me more sedative after they asked me that, because I was not aware during the transport process. And I remember them saying, okay, like, we'll give you something more to, like, put you back to sleep for a little while. So then I woke up, it was around 5:30, 5 p.m. I woke up this time, so a much more decent hour. My friend Brenda was there, and so that was good that I was not alone this time. In fact, this time she took a picture of me. I asked her to. I wrote on my whiteboard, like, take picture, because she was, like, on the phone with my parents when she first saw me, and when I was, like, waking up, so she would be like, Michaela's waking up, blah, 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 and, like, keeping them updated. I remember saying, like, take my picture, like, I wrote on the whiteboard, take my picture, and then I went like this to my mom and took this picture. I'll insert it here. I think that it's a little weird to have a picture of them like this, but I love it. I love this picture because I look back from this picture to say this picture, and it's just a testament of how far I've come and how much I've overcome with this. You guys know this was a process. 3 years in the making. Has been no easy. It's taken more risk than most 22-year-olds would take with their health. And deciding to go through with this, it was worth every risk, and I can say that because it went well, and I realized what a gift that is. I look at that picture and how much I've overcome and the strength that it's taken me, that God has given me, to get through this past year. In that picture, I was experiencing, other than getting the screw pierced through my head while awake, I was in the time of my life where I was experiencing the most physical pain I'd ever experienced. You guys know that this time period of halo traction and my spinal surgeries was a really special time for me and a really amazing time because I got to see and witness and experience God working in my life firsthand. I have every day, like every day is a gift and every breath is a gift, but in ways that is truly indescribable. When you're faced with these harsh realities and then you totally exceed everyone's expectations and exceed all medical textbook outcome possibilities for a person in my health condition, there's truly no words to describe what that feels like. And so that picture is just really special to me because it's a great way for me to look back at how far I've come, because even though things are still really hard, there's more to the story, but even though things are still really hard, I look back at how much harder things were several months ago when waking up from my second spinal fusion and realizing how much easier things really have gotten, and it really puts things in perspective for me when it feels like this journey is never ending. So then during the night, things got pretty eventful. I started vomiting. You are intubated. That is really bad. That is really, really bad because it puts you at humongous risk for respiration pneumonia. Given my lung health, that could kill me. Pretty ironic because we were worried about what effect that this surgery could have on my lungs and the possible need for a trach, and here I am out of the surgery. The vent is what could have killed me. And they couldn't figure out why I was vomiting. I was just getting so sick. But somehow I knew how to get sick without breathing in. I knew that I was still intubated and how bad this was. And so by the grace of God, I knew how to get sick without breathing it back in. They were kind of in panic mode because of how bad this could have been for me so quickly. Kind of go back out for a little bit, wake up and get sick. And during one of my moments of being somewhat alert, I remember off in the distance hearing the nurse say medication name, and my eyes just got so big, I remember, and I just remember her saying it on her way out or something, turn down this maybe, and I wrote on my whiteboard, am I on this medication? And the nurse said yes. Said turn that off now. I'm allergic to this medication, severely allergic. They added this other pain medication, I guess, some time after my friends had left, because while they were there, I was not getting sick. This happened late in the night. This is the only, second bad nurse experience I had, which for a 28-day stay, 2 bad nurses is pretty good out of 28 days of being in the hospital. And so somehow, some way, I was given a medication that was on my allergy list. I don't know how something like that gets missed. I know that healthcare is run by humans, but I will never forget that moment. And just so grateful that God gave me the strength and the will to wake up during that moment and to happen to hear her say that medication name. Had she not said it, I would have never known. They would have never known what was causing me to get so sick. Other than this, they had not done anything different in my regimen than what they did after my original spinal fusion, and I did not get sick at all after my original spinal fusion. I said that medication name, and I wrote on my report, turn that off now, I'm severely allergic. What, you are? And I said yes, check my list. And so they did, and they're like, oh, she's right, we need to turn this off. I don't know how that got missed. And I should say though, before I found out what it was, I remember feeling, not only was I getting so sick, I could have aspirated, but it didn't. I was just feeling really weak, and then at the very tail end, right before I heard what medication it was, because another nurse had suggested, maybe turn this down, and that was the medication that I was allergic to. I remember feeling really lightheaded, so I wrote getting lightheaded. 2 minutes later I heard maybe turn this down, and I was like, what? And that's when I turned this off. That was really scary, being lightheaded, because I'd never been that lightheaded before, and I've never passed out. I did not pass out, but I was just really whoa. They turned it off, and I immediately stopped getting sick, started to come back to life, as I explained. This is why a patient should never be left to be alone. Healthcare is run by humans, and I was not in the capacity to speak for myself. I was in and out of consciousness. I shouldn't say in and out of consciousness, well, I guess in and out of sleep. I just happened to hear her say that this name of this medication had not been mentioned the whole time. She said it the one time, and I heard her say it, and that's how I knew. But I wasn't in the capacity to do much more than that, and had I not heard, I would have never known. And I just thank God that he hooked me up during that time, and that the name of the medication was said, because I would have aspirated that. Oh, I can't even think about how bad that would be for me. Like, I may not even be here. This is why a patient should never be left vulnerable away from friends or family, no matter who they have in their life during these times, because healthcare is run by humans. Not all nurses are good at their job. Not all nurses pay attention to detail, unfortunately. And especially in the ICU, it's even more crucial, because it's called intensive care unit for a reason. I just don't know what would have happened if I wouldn't have heard. I just can't even think about it. This is why these visitor restriction policies in this time, especially this far into the you-know-what virus, is totally unnecessary. And there's no excuse for patients to be alone and vulnerable, unable to communicate, because healthcare is run by humans, and one mistake, that was really, really scary. So they finally got the medication under control. Well, got rid of it, came back to life, and a little bit of restful sleep finally after getting so sick, and got some good sleep finally. Normal morning hours come, and they were eager to be extubated after everything that had went on. I was really, really nervous to get extubated again, even though, again, they thought I would need 2 nights, but did great in 1, so they got the team all put up in their gear, because I'm on the floor that has COVID patients. Well, there's no longer a COVID unit in this hospital, so they just put COVID patients on the ICU unit. So I'm on a floor with COVID patients, so the intubation and extubation team are suited up like a COVID unit because they're dealing with COVID patients. I will talk about this in another segment as well, but I actually had a psychologist while I was inpatient. I met her like the second week I was there, and she was incredible. I don't talk about this often, but I struggle with GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. I've struggled with it since I was 6 or 7 years old. No triggers. I just have always struggled with it. I don't talk about it, not that I'm ashamed about it. I just don't like talking about it. You guys know I'm very open about my health conditions and everything, but that's one area that I keep private just because I don't enjoy talking about it, and I don't enjoy educating about it. I know that sounds horrible, because mental health is important. I just don't enjoy talking about it. I keep that part of my life private. I was alone and had no one, and I was struggling with some things because of what had happened with me not being able to feel my extremities, not being listened to. Pain management was a struggle, and there was just some days that I was really struggling, and they decided to bring her on board and to chat and not do anything particular. I'm already on medication for my GAD. I've been on it for over 10 years, and it's great. Changed my life. So she didn't do anything like that, but I had tried psychologists and counseling before, so many. Never found one that I liked. Never found one that was helpful. I don't know, I guess if you deal with anxiety, maybe this helps you, but I can tell you for most people that telling them to picture the happiest day of their life does not make their panic attacks go away. Anyways, so I gave up. I never did any type of counseling or went and saw any type of psychologist because it never helped me, and I went through so many. There just comes a point where, at least for me, that I had to say this isn't working. When they told me they were gonna bring her on my inpatient team, I was nervous as all get out, because I was not another one, because all the other ones that I've seen were no good. I didn't like the way that they talked, or, I don't know, just not a good fit. She was honestly the best that I ever had. She's so nice. She is so kind, and just provided me with someone to talk. I talked to my friends and family on the phone, but phone and FaceTime only does so much. There's something about in-person interaction, right? It's so important for your mental health, and that's something that we have not talked about the past year and a half for patients, is how important in-person interaction and how damaging that these visitor restriction policies are for patients and their mental health and their physical health. That's another topic for another day. She was incredible and really just had a huge impact on me during my stay. Like a friend to talk to. Just so nice, so understanding. Treated me like an adult and respected me, respected my wishes, didn't do things I didn't want to do, didn't add medications I didn't want to add. I was happy with how things were, and she was respectful that way. And somehow she had found out, well, she knew when my surgery was going to be, but she found out when I was going to be extubated. She came in the morning when I was extubated to see me and be with me, and I will never forget that. She held my hand while they extubated me. I will never forget that. And to be there for me, a simple thing like that, like holding my hand while I was being extubated, like, I will never forget that. So let that be a reminder to you that the smallest things that you do for someone can make the biggest impact, and I will never forget that. And so she stayed for a little bit. Extubation went well. And again, I exceeded all expectations. Extubated less than 24 hours after overcoming the impossible again. Waking up and realizing that again and was not paralyzed. Another interesting part of this I forgot to mention. Before going into the surgery, the loose hardware is what was causing my feeling in my extremities, but a piece of hardware that was loose, that was near my spinal cord, the area of the spinal cord that it was near was not where I should be losing feeling, but spinal cord can send weird signals. So there was a chance that I could wake up from the surgery and still not regain any feeling in my extremities, because clinically the piece of hardware was not where I would typically lose feeling in my extremities. I would have lost feeling elsewhere, but being the culprit, because I woke up and I was like, immediately got feeling in my extremities. So that was like the very first thing they asked me, even like while I was still intubated, they had me write it on the whiteboard because they wanted to know right away. And I said, yes, I can feel everything. It's just so surreal that going through this a second, not only was it a miracle the first time, but knowing I had done the impossible twice was just amazing, and it's a testament again to God's faithfulness. And so the surgery itself went just as smooth as the first. I mentioned that she did not put the loose piece of hardware back in. Instead, I'll try to insert a picture. Really hard to see, but instead put a clip. She explained to me in the next day that I saw her, she explained to me she put a clip. There's the 2 rods, and then there is a connector clip. So instead of another screw, because for some reason I have a weak spot right there. So instead of another screw, she decided not smart to put another screw because that one will probably just come loose. So she put a connector clip. I forget what it's called, but it connects the 2 rods together and holds them together just like the screw would, but it's just a different kind of connection because I had to have something there to give that stability in that big area. So that's what she ended up doing, and all the other hardware went back in just fine. Again, no blood transfusion needed, which was incredible, and everything just went perfect again. So it was the spinal fusion revision surgery. It was a whirlwind. The aftermath was very scary again, and getting so sick while intubated is so dangerous. Just could have gone so wrong. I'm so grateful for God's protection over me during that scary and vulnerable time. We're on like going into week 3 here, so when I had my revision surgery, and I was in the hospital for 4 weeks, so we're in week 3 now, so there's not too much more to say and to talk about before discharge and everything, but that's pretty much the day of surgery and the morning of extubation. Everything just went smooth, and I spent the day just sleeping the day away. So I'll get into what goes on, and as we get closer to discharge finally after 28 days in the hospital from 2 spinal surgeries. But not only do I get to say that I overcame the impossible, but after January 11th, 2021, I was able to say I overcame the impossible twice. I can't wait to share with you the rest of this journey and the other miracles that I experienced during this time.